My studio currently looks like this. It flooded over winter and it got very cold in there and the plant died and everything went mouldy, including one of my paintings. It's all fixable. I'll be back in there in the spring, but for now I am back to painting on my dining room table. But because of who I am as a person, we're gonna need something spread on the table to stop me ruining it any more than I already have. Are you the artist now? Hello, welcome to me painting and talking about it at the same time, which might not go particularly well. Here's the scene I'll be painting today, based on a photo I took when me and my friend Maddie caught a glimpse of the sunset through a window and then went running to go and see it, and it was very worth it. I'll be working in oils today. They have fast become my favourite medium. They're just, unfortunately, expensive. As you can see, here I have one very, very grimy painty jar and one freshly washed olive jar. And here is my solvent, which gets really mucky really quickly. But if you leave it to sit for a while, then all of the paint sediment will sink to the bottom. So then you get a fresh jar, and as you pour it off, it should all run completely clear. At the bottom, you'll end up with this gross sludge. No matter what colours you use, it always ends up the exact same shade of grey. But I always keep this sludge because you can use it for underpaintings. There are a lot of ways to begin an oil painting, and I'll be honest, I don't stick to one technique. A large part of the reason I don't do this very often is that people expect me to have one teachable way of working, when really I kind of just slap things on the canvas and hope that it turns out well. There is a thought process behind it, I just can't exactly put into words what that is. So this will be interesting. If this painting was a portrait or something with a lot of complicated little details, I would do a drawing first. Often with landscapes, I just go wild. It's all loose and I just go. So that's what's happening today. I'm just going. I'm going to tone my canvas using a wash of 3 colours. I've got cadmium yellow, cadmium red and French ultramarine. It's a bit dark, isn't it? Shall I stick a light on? Is that better? So using some of my now clean solvent, I'm going to start off by diluting some yellow and just do a light wash of that. It doesn't matter if the paint runs or anything, this is all going to be painted over. And then the same with the red. The red is a very strong colour, so we just want the lightest little bit of that. I think this light is casting really weird shadows. My production value, not great. And then same again, really diluting this ultramarine and just a wash of that over the top. So here's what looks like a child's watercolour painting. I find toning canvas like this just really useful so that you're not starting with a completely blank slate. It helps me to know where I am, it helps me establish values, and also it means that if you leave any of this peeking through, you don't have that bright white of a blank canvas. Next, using this paint sludge, I'm going to draw out the basic shapes of the cliff and the foreground. Again, this is not the sort of thing I'm particularly precise with. All of the detail comes later, and the good thing about oils is that you can layer and layer and layer. If you could see my eyes right now, you'd see that they're constantly flicking between the painting and the reference image. One of the golden rules of composition is the rule of thirds. You don't have to follow this. Like any rules, they're kind of arbitrary in some cases. But if you look at this image, you can see that this tower is about 1/3 of the way into the painting. So let's put it there, just roughly. And you can also see that the sun will be 1/3 on the other side. This is one of those rules that just kind of guarantees that your composition isn't going to look terrible. It's a very basic rule though, and a lot of people think that it means that your art will end up looking generic, so I will say that composition is one of the things that I struggle with, which is why painting from a reference is easier. There's a lot of debate about whether painting from a reference photo is good. In my view, painting from life is great for figuring out composition, and it's really fun, to be honest. I think I prefer painting from life, I suppose. But I think painting from reference is a great, easy way to improve your skills, and it helps you to figure out, look at that running down there. It will run because it's very liquid at this point. And that's okay. Like I say, this is all going to get painted over. What was I saying? This is the thing, I'm going to keep getting distracted by my own self. Yeah, you're allowed to paint from reference if you want to. I don't think that makes it not art. There are certainly some things you can't capture if you paint from reference, because you're always going to see it through the eyes of a camera, which is not what the human eye sees. And obviously you won't get a sense of being there so well, you won't get the smells and the sounds which can all influence a painting. But most of my paintings are done from reference, and I think as long as there's sort of meaning in the reference picture, then that will come across. So now things are very, very vaguely and faintly marked out. I'm going to go and have a tea break, and that time will allow a little bit of this solvent to evaporate, just making it easier to paint on top. I'm back from my tea break, sort of. I'm still drinking the tea, and now I'm going to move on to the actual beginning of the actual painting. So I'm going to add some white and some black to my palette. A lot of artists are very prepared with their palettes. They pre-mix all their colours. I don't do that. To me, part of the fun comes from mixing the colours as I go along, but each to their own. If you're a particularly organised person, I'm not one of those people. Feel free to pre-mix your colours, but that's just too much for me, apparently. So I'm going to start off with the sky, although I often find skies take several layers to build up the clouds. Mixing white, ultramarine and a little bit of black, I'm going to get that sort of cool grey-blue at the top of the painting. I also sometimes sacrilegiously mix colours actually on my painting rather than on my palette. A lot of people say that's wrong. Honestly, nothing's wrong. I'm not going to tell you that the way that I do this is the right way, but it's also not wrong, because art, you can't be wrong in art, can you? I think this is why I dropped out of art college. I like figuring things out. I don't like people telling me how to go about it. Which is ironic, seeing as I'm now making a video telling you how to go about it. So now we've got some pretty impressive purples and pinks. Actually, with the colours that I have, it's quite difficult to mix a good purple. It ends up a little bit muddy, but oil paints are expensive and I don't want to invest in any more colours than the ones I already have. Now, using this dry brush, I'm just going to brush over it to smooth and blend some of the edges. Now that we've got those colours blocked in, I'm going to add the landmass and this foreground bit here. So I'll start off with what's almost black. It's got a bit of burnt sienna and yellow mixed into it. And I'll just mark out the darkest points here. Where the sun hits the rock in the reference image, there's a sort of lovely pink tinge. So hopefully I can capture that here. This landmass is where I want to be a bit more precise. It's a very recognisable spot of my local landscape and I want to do it justice. I'm a lot less precise when it comes to things like the sky. It doesn't really matter how many clouds you have other than, you know, what you think looks good compositionally. So I'm going to add quite a muted, subtle green here. I don't want it too strong because the colour of the sky is so bold. If I put in anything too bright, it's just going to look garish and childlike. I'm using a smaller brush now just to mark in the smaller bits of rock here. So I suppose I see this as sort of the second underpainting. This is by no means finished, but now we have the guideline on which we're going to base all of the detail. And it helps to figure out where you want the detail, like what is the point of the painting. I think the point of this painting is going to be this tower here. So we want this landmass and the sun right behind it as the focus, and we won't go into so much detail here in the front, otherwise it will distract from that. At least that's my plan. As you can probably tell from the way that I paint, it all kind of comes together as it happens rather than before it happens. I don't plan things very well. This is also when I start to add thicker layers of paint. So instead of just a wash being wiped over it, I will load up my brush a lot thicker and add a bit of texture to my paintings. I think a large part of why I work in layers is that I get bored of the same bit at the same time, so I like to go through and do a bit of all of it before I come back to the individual parts. I often find when it comes to things like sunsets that the clouds are a lot darker than you think they are. You think of a sunset sky as a super bright thing, but actually the thing that is bright is the sun. I'm going to put the sun in around here, and the only way to make that stand out and look super bright is by having everything that's around it be a bit darker. That might sound really obvious, but it's one of those things that you don't quite realise how much it makes a difference. So up here we have a nice bright yellow highlight, and you can see how that stands out now that I've made everything around it darker, but I'm still going to blend it out a bit because the thing that we want to be the brightest is the sun, which I'm just going to plot in here. I quite often use my finger when I'm painting skies. It blends things out nicely and it makes really good clouds. It's getting dark and my camera is starting to run out of battery, and I'm gonna move on to painting the sea. This is a bit that I find really tricky because you've got to get it in a straight line, which that is certainly not. Now, I don't really want too much detail in the sea, especially back here. I feel that I don't really want the attention to be drawn behind this, which is the main bit, and the sun kind of draws your eye there anyway, so I don't really want to put too much busyness going on here. It is really weird trying to articulate how I paint because nothing that I'm saying is untrue, but I don't actually think this clearly when I'm painting by myself and not talking about it. Quite often I watch videos of other artists painting and giving advice, and I'm sort of like, how do they know that that's what they're doing? Because I don't know what I'm doing, it just happens. I'm just doing some quite loose strokes for the sea. I find often the harder I try with the sea, the less it looks like water. Now it's just a case of adding this bit of foreground properly before I see how the whole thing looks, and then I'll make the final changes. Thank you for watching me ramble for a ridiculously long time. Here it is. I'm at that stage at the moment where I've been staring at it for too long and I can't tell if I like it or dislike it or if it needs more detail. But for a painting done in basically one sitting, unless you include the tea break, it's alright. See you soon, perhaps. I mean, I always say that and then it's like 4 months in between videos, but